The wind carried the scent of blood and gunpowder through the canyon that night, pressing against her chest like an omen. By morning, the survivors would be forced to face their darkest impulses just to see the sun again, and as the final shot echoed, she realized the true cost of hope in a world that devoured the weak. The land stretched endless and unforgiving. Parched plains looming butts, and scattering tumbleweeds baked under an unrelenting sun. The horizon lay vast and empty, filled with the promise and terror of frontier life. The year had brought both blessings and disasters to these dusty expanses. New railroad lines promised commerce and civilization, yet an outbreak of violent bandit raids left many settlers burying more dreams than harvests. From atop a rocky outcrop near the Snake River, Evelyn Cole surveyed the farmland that had once been her father's pride. Though only 23, she had endured enough to last a lifetime. The death of both her parents, the betrayal of neighbors when times grew lean, and the loneliness that roamed freely in her empty family ranch. She brushed back strands of raven black hair and steadied her breathing. The memory of gunfire flitted through her mind. She could still hear it on windless nights, cracks of rifles and the helpless scream of her father, an echo that refused to fade. Evelyn's goal was simple survival. She planned to gather enough money to rebuild her father's homestead in the next county, far from the bloodstains of her past. But fear tightened in her chest whenever she glimpsed how lawless the West truly was. Her greatest fear was trusting the wrong person again and being left to fend for herself, or worse, dying unremembered in the dirt. The emotional weight she carried was a heavy albatross. Her father's final command, to stay strong, rang in her ears each morning. But how could she honor that promise if the future felt as hostile as the desert sun on her back? The shrill cry of a hawk overhead startled her from her thoughts. She smoothed the dust off her long, faded skirt and checked the revolver at her hip. It was her father's old Colt, the handle worn and smooth. She had fired it only a handful of times, but each shot seared through her conscience. Violence had become something she neither craved nor feared. It was simply another tool to survive. Meanwhile, across the valley, Jeremiah Finch carefully navigated a narrow pass between two boulders. He was a tall, gaunt figure with tired eyes and a wide, brimmed hat that had seen better days. Jeremiah was no stranger to the law or to the ways of men who believed bullets could solve their problems. He traveled alone, carrying a rough, hewn sense of duty that clashed with a guilt he could never quite shake. He had the scar of an old bullet wound on his right shoulder, earned in a shootout that had left his partner behind in a dusty street. Jeremiah's goal was redemption. He had once pinned a silver star to his vest, but after failing to protect those closest to him, he renounced the badge. Instead, he wandered from town to town, trying to settle the scales of his conscience by lending aid to folks in need. But his greatest fear was that it was already too late for atonement, that no matter how many times he protected the innocent or stepped in to end cruelty, his good deeds would never blot out the blood on his hands. The sun set behind them as circumstance forced these two strangers onto the same path, a narrow wagon trail that promised a quicker route to civilization, but cut through land rumored to be haunted by marauders. Long shadows crept across the plains as thunderheads gathered in the distance, casting a low rumble like distant cannons across the twilight sky. Evelyn hadn't expected to cross paths with anyone that evening. Her supplies were meager, her horse a single mare named Rosie. She gave a short, cautious nod to Jeremiah, who was leading a bay gelding. Both travelers stepped aside on the narrow trail, silently weighing each other. "Evelyn," Jeremiah said, tipping his hat, the brim worn thin from years of travel. Evelyn offered a polite nod, her hand resting near the revolver. "You heading to the next town?" He angled his head. "I am. Figure I could resupply there. Work, maybe." He paused. "There's talk of trouble along these roads. You might want to camp back with the rest of the settlers near the river crossing. Safety in numbers." Evelyn crossed her arms. "I've learned that numbers don't always help. Last time I was in a camp with numbers, folks started killing, each other over half a ration of jerky. Jeremiah's eyes flickered with something between regret and empathy. "I've seen that happen too," he admitted. "Still, if we're both heading the same direction, we might as well ride together for a time, if that suits you." She hesitated. Her fear, that trusting the wrong person would cost her life, knotted in her throat, but she also understood that traveling alone had its own dangers. "All right," she answered, "but only until we make the next settlement." They rode side by side, tensions coiled beneath a fragile alliance. Neither truly trusted the other, but for tonight, caution melded with necessity. The horizon, once bright with promise, now faded into twilight as a scattering of stars peeked through a smoky haze of clouds. An uneasy silence fell between them, broken occasionally by the creaking of saddle leather or the sigh of the wind against distant rocks. Each carried a secret hope. For her, a new beginning; for him, a chance to finally make right what once went wrong. Thus began their perilous journey into a land that knew neither mercy nor second chances, a place where only the fiercest hearts could hold on to life, and where one woman would soon discover what it truly meant to survive when no one else could. A cold wind swept in after nightfall. Evelyn and Jeremiah made camp in the lee of a sandstone outcrop, using the rock's bulk to shield them from fierce gusts. The horses stamped anxiously, their breaths misting in the sudden chill. Over a small fire, Jeremiah heated up a pot of coffee and some beans, offering half to Evelyn. She accepted but kept her gaze vigilant, scanning the dark. "They say bandits roam these parts, some ghostly gang that appears at dusk and disappears by dawn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jeremiah poked at the embers. "I've heard those stories. Usually it's just men with rifles. Ghosts or not, we should keep watch." A hush lingered, heavy as lead. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the low whistle of the wind among the boulders. Evelyn found herself looking at Jeremiah's scar, faintly illuminated by firelight through his threadbare shirt. "What happened there?" she asked, nodding at his shoulder. He shrugged, uncomfortable. "A bullet, long ago. The man who shot me took something precious from me too. My partner. She was a fine lawkeeper, better than I ever was. I should have protected her, but well, it didn't work out that way." Evelyn's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He swallowed, his jaw tightening. "Regret weighs heavier out here, I suppose." They lapsed into silence once more. For a moment, mutual vulnerability settled between them. In that hush, they recognized the battered corners of each other's soul, the parts that blawed regrets and fears. The howling wind carried a lonely note across the plains, and Evelyn shivered, though the night was not unbearably cold. They settled down for the night, each promising the other they would keep half a watch. Neither quite trusted the arrangement, so they slept lightly, with hands near their guns. In those few hours, nightmares danced behind their eyelids for Evelyn, the memory of her father's land soaked in blood; for Jeremiah, a dusty street and the echo of a gunshot that spelled the end of someone he'd loved. Morning broke with a cool glow across the Wyoming sky. The world felt fresh, almost gentle, for the brief moments before day's heat would awaken. As they packed up camp, Evelyn offered a short, quiet thanks for the meal, and Jeremiah responded with a polite nod. They rode in companionable silence, occasionally trading comments about the steepness of the trail or the dryness of the weather. By mid-morning, they reached a fork. One direction led to a well-known wagon route frequented by merchants and travelers, a safer path though longer. The other led through a labyrinth of canyons where water sources were scarce and bandits rumored to hide. The second path was much shorter, cutting days off their journey. Evelyn pulled her horse to a stop. "Which way do you figure to go?" Jeremiah glanced down the longer road. "That road is safer. Maybe we should stick to it." Evelyn bit her lower lip. "I don't have the supplies for a long detour. The next settlement is rumored to be near the canyons, not along the bigger wagon trail. It's a risk, but I think I have to take it." He exhaled, obviously torn. "Guess we're going the hard way, then." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you following me?" He paused, looking pensive. "I don't think you'll make it through alone. No offense, but I've seen these Badlands. And if there really is a gang prowling around, you'd stand a better chance with another gun by your side." The edges of her mouth softened into something like a grateful smile, though guarded. "All right, Jeremiah Finch, we'll do it together." So they guided their horses into the winding, shadowy canyons, where steep red walls rose on either side like the jaws of a beast. The sun was high and merciless. Heat shimmered off the canyon walls, creating illusions of movement in the distance. Evelyn's canteen grew lighter with each gulp. Water had become precious. Jeremiah rode slightly ahead, eyes narrowed, scanning the cliff ledges for any sign of trouble. Halfway through a particularly narrow gorge, a sudden crack ricocheted. Like thunder, but sharper. It was a rifle shot. Their horses neighed in panic, nearly throwing both riders down. Jeremiah barked. He swung from his saddle, dragging Rosie's reins so Evelyn's mare wouldn't bolt. Evelyn leapt off too, pressing her back against a rocky protrusion that offered a trace of cover. 2 more shots echoed through the canyon. Chips of stone rained down around them. Their attackers were hidden somewhere up in the jagged rocks. "They've got the high ground," Evelyn hissed. "We have to move." Jeremiah checked the cylinder of his revolver. "You fire a few shots to keep their heads down. I'll circle around and try to flush them out." Evelyn nodded, bracing herself. She fired blindly at the ridge, heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. The echo of her shots churned in the canyon. Jeremiah dashed behind the outcrop and started climbing, each step precarious on loose gravel. Seconds stretched like hours. Evelyn could hardly breathe. Her memories of the last firefight she'd been in clawed at her mind. She kept firing sporadically, counting her bullets. She only had a few left. Then from above, Jeremiah's voice thundered, "Drop it." A single high-pitched yelp, then a rustling scuffle. More shots rang out. Evelyn peered up, catching glimpses of figures scrambling across the rocks. She heard Jeremiah grunt, followed by a metallic clang, like a rifle hitting the ground. She scaled a short boulder to see the aftermath. 3 men, ragged in appearance, lay or crouched near the ridge. One clutched a bleeding shoulder. Another had dropped his weapon. Jeremiah stood over them, his revolver still smoking. The canyon fell silent aside from the men's ragged breathing and the echo of the encounter. Evelyn approached carefully, her own revolver raised. "Who are you people?" Jeremiah demanded, voice low and dangerous. One of the bandits spit at the ground. "We're just trying to survive, same as you." He spoke in a rasp, blinking sweat from his eyes. "We didn't mean nothing by it." Evelyn's lip curled. "You tried to shoot us. Lot o' folks come through here and kill us on sight if they can." The wounded man retorted. "We ain't got no home, no ranch. Just these rocks." Tension thickened as Jeremiah considered his next move. They were outnumbered but had the advantage now. Yet something in his eyes flickered with compassion. He took a slow step back, lowering his gun just a fraction. "Take your wounded," he said, gesturing. "Move on. We're not looking for any more trouble." One of the bandits, who must have been older, stared up at Jeremiah in disbelief. "Yo, you're letting us go." Jeremiah's jaw was set tight. "You fire another shot at us, and I promise I won't be so merciful next time." The men gathered themselves, glaring but not daring to fight back. They retreated, cursing under their breath as they disappeared around the canyon bend, cradling the wounded. Evelyn let out a shaky exhale. "You're sure about that?" Jeremiah holstered his revolver. "I'm not interested in spilling more blood today." She eyed him with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Part of her felt they should have finished the job. Bandits were bandits, after all. Another part agreed that more killing would only deepen the shadows on their souls. They continued onward. The ambush was a reminder of just how precarious life was in these deserted stretches. But it also revealed something about Jeremiah. He was a man who still clung to some code of mercy, however battered that code might be. They found a small spring trickling out of the canyon wall and decided to camp nearby. Evelyn rinsed dust from her hair while Jeremiah refilled their canteens. The confrontation still weighted the air between them. "You saved us back there," Evelyn said quietly. He shrugged. "You saved me too. Your shots kept them from pinning me down." She gave him a small smile. "Thank you for not killing them." Jeremiah nodded slowly. "Sometimes a man needs to remember that not everyone on the other side of the gun is a monster. Some folks are just desperate." They shared a somber meal, a bit of jerky and the last of her father's bread, which was tough but still edible. Overhead the sky turned a bruised violet, and stars crept in one by one. In the flicker of their campfire, they seemed less like strangers. For a moment, it felt like they had known each other for years, bound by scars that no one else could truly understand. A different kind of threat loomed across the sky. Dark, churning clouds billowed in from the west, pregnant with thunder. The canyon's narrow walls echoed the distant rumble ominously. "We have to keep moving," Jeremiah said. "Flash floods are no joke in terrain like this. If the skies open up, these gorges'll fill with water in minutes." Evelyn's face fell. "But we need to find higher ground," he pointed. "There's a plateau up ahead, might offer some safety, but we'll need to move fast." They rode with urgency, urging their horses through the winding paths. The wind picked up, whipping dust into their eyes. The first raindrops tapped their shoulders like warnings. Then the heavens split open. A deluge poured down, thunder echoing as if the sky itself cracked. Water began streaming across the rocky surfaces, forming instant rivulets that converged into rushing flows. Their horses struggled on the slick ground, hooves sliding. Jeremiah shouted over the roaring water, "This way!" He guided them up a narrow slope that zigzagged toward the plateau. But the climb was harrowing. Rocks tumbled beneath them, and the ledge was barely wide enough for one horse at a time. Lightning flashed, illuminating the canyon in a stark white glare. For an instant, Evelyn caught a glimpse of the swirling, muddy torrent below, its roar so loud it felt alive. Her heart pounded in her chest. A shuddering crack sounded above them as a bolt of lightning struck the cliff face. Boulders broke loose, crashing down. She screamed. Jeremiah's gelding reared, nearly losing its footing. Evelyn's mare whinnied in terror. "Keep going!" Jeremiah bellowed. They pressed on, the stinging rain lashing their faces. Each step risked a fatal slip. Finally, with a last desperate push, they reached the plateau, a wide shelf of rock high above the flood. There, the rain still pelted them, but at least they were safe from the raging water below. They huddled under a small overhang, soaked to the bone, each breath shaking with adrenaline. The fury of the storm droned around them. Evelyn's eyes burned from the mixture of rain and tears. She wasn't even sure why she was crying, fear, relief, grief, or all three. Jeremiah reached out a tentative hand, placing it on her shoulder. She didn't flinch away. "We made it," he said, voice trembling with exhaustion. She nodded, swallowing back a sob. In that moment, she realized how fragile everything was. Life could be swept away in an instant. Despite her guarded nature, she found comfort in Jeremiah's presence, in the fact that they had, against odds, survived together. They stayed there for hours as the storm raged on. With no firewood dry enough to burn, they simply endured the cold, the wet, and the unrelenting surge of nature. When the thunder finally rolled into the distance, dawn was already a faint glow in the east. When morning light spilled across the plateau, it revealed a changed world. The canyons were still, glistening with puddles and streams. Debris littered the lower gullies. Their horses, trembling but alive, stood close by. Evelyn pushed wet hair from her face. "Let's never do that again," she murmured, wryly. Jeremiah chuckled, though the sound came out ragged. "I'll drink to that, if we can find something stronger than coffee." They packed their soggy belongings, grateful for the day's reprieve. But a silent dread gnawed at them. This land offered no guarantees. They would have to stay alert for the next hardship the West threw at them. They traveled deeper into the heart of the wilderness, forging a cautious camaraderie. Day by day, The terrain shifted from jagged canyon walls to rolling grasslands framed by distant mountains. They relied on each other's strengths: Jeremiah's watchful eye and disciplined marksmanship, Evelyn's resourcefulness and steady nerve. At night they sometimes talked about the future. Evelyn shared her dream of rebuilding her father's homestead, living off the land like he once had. Jeremiah revealed little, but she sensed a hidden longing for peace, something he believed he didn't deserve. On the 7th day of their journey together, they spotted smoke rising beyond a cluster of trees. Hope flared in Evelyn.
"Maybe it's the settlement."
They approached warily. Instead of a bustling town, they found a ragged campsite of refugees who had fled bandits. Women, children, and a few old men huddled around dying fires, their possessions scattered. A gaunt mother clutched a baby, eyes hollow with hunger. The entire scene spoke of desperation. Evelyn dismounted and offered what little food she could spare. Jeremiah handed out the last of his jerky, his face grim. They asked about the nearest settlement. One of the older men spat in the dust. The place was overrun by outlaws a fortnight ago. They took what they wanted, burned down half the buildings, and left us with nothing. We're the lucky ones who got away. A cold tremor of fear swept through Evelyn. We were counting on resupplying there. Don't bother, the old man said. They left behind only ashes. Evelyn and Jeremiah exchanged worried looks. Supplies were dangerously low, no more beans or coffee, and only half a canteen of water each. They needed a new plan. During that night, as they sat with the refugees, Jeremiah grew restless. He picked at his worn jacket, arms tense. Evelyn noticed. "You all right?" she asked softly. He stared into the dying embers of the fire. "No, these people, someone should do something." She sighed. "We can't fight a whole gang of outlaws by ourselves." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I need to try. These folks might die otherwise. I can't walk away again." An argument sparked between them, the tension of exhaustion and desperation catching fire. "What about us? We'll starve if we don't find new supplies, Jeremiah," Evelyn said, voice quivering with frustration. "I respect your need to fix what's wrong, but you can't save everyone. Not if it costs our lives." He stood abruptly. "I didn't ask you to come with me. I've got my reasons. I won't fail again. Not this time." She stared at him, stunned and hurt. "You can't do this alone. I won't drag you down with me." He snapped, though the sadness in his eyes betrayed him. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Evelyn awoke to find Jeremiah gone. His horse, his gear, everything. All that remained was a single note scrawled on a scrap of paper. "Forgive me. I can't abandon these people. Don't wait for me. JF." She stood there, her hand trembling around the note. The refugees looked on silently, pity in their wary eyes. A wave of anger, betrayal, and sorrow crashed over her. He had left her behind, just as she feared from the start. Part of her wanted to rush after him, to demand he not go alone. Another part, the wounded part, wanted to leave him to his fate. She crumpled the note in her fist, tears burning. Alone again, she closed her eyes, taking a slow breath. Now what? Hours stretched into a day as Evelyn remained with the refugees, haunted by confusion and a tangle of emotions. She considered heading onward by herself, forging a solitary path. But something in her refused to forget Jeremiah's kindness. The way he had saved her from ambush, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke about mercy. Late that afternoon, a mother's frantic screams shattered the camp. "Bandits! They're coming back!" A scout rushed into camp. They're riding in from the south. No more than 8 of 'em, but they're armed to the teeth. Panic exploded. Families scrambled, gathering children and whatever meager supplies they had. Evelyn's heart pounded. She realized that if Jeremiah had gone to confront these outlaws alone, he might already be in grave danger. She grabbed her father's Colt, checking the few bullets she had left. The weight of the decision pressed down on her. She could flee now and maybe survive. Or she could stand and fight, risking her life for people she barely knew, and a man who had abandoned her. A memory struck her, Her father's final words, "Stay strong." This was not just about Jeremiah. It was about all the innocent people who needed help. She saddled Rosie in a rush, her heart hammering as she rode toward the enemy. The air was thick with dread, the sun a blazing orb sinking toward the horizon. A mile from the camp, she found Jeremiah pinned down behind a crumbling rock wall. 5 or 6 outlaws were crouched behind scattered boulders, exchanging fire with him. Another pair advanced from the flank. Evelyn kicked her heels, urging Rosie into a gallop. She fired a shot in the air, drawing the outlaws' attention. One turned to face her, raising his rifle too slow. She fired, and the man toppled backward. "Evelyn!" Jeremiah shouted, shock lacing his tone. She slid off her horse behind a fallen log for cover.
You owe me an apology,
she yelled back over the gunfire. He almost laughed, a breathless sound of mingled relief and desperation. Then the outlaws closed in. Bullets ripped through the brush. The smell of gunpowder and adrenaline churned in the smoky twilight. Jeremiah reloaded, his hands unsteady. "They've got the advantage. We have to draw them out or we'll be cornered." Evelyn nodded. Together they laid down covering fire, forcing the bandits to retreat behind a larger rock. She moved to flank them, pressing her stomach flat against the earth, each inch a test of courage. When she was close enough, she fired at the group's leader, a wary man with a scar across his cheek. Her bullet grazed his arm. He howled, and in the confusion Jeremiah sprang from cover, taking out another bandit with a clean shot to the chest. The leader turned, fury glowing in his eyes. He raised his pistol, aiming at Jeremiah's heart. Time seemed to slow. Evelyn had 1 bullet left. Her finger squeezed the trigger, but the hammer clicked on an empty chamber. A wave of terror swept over her. She was out of ammunition. Jeremiah would die if she couldn't stop the man. In a flash of instinct, she grabbed a rock and threw it with all her might. It struck the outlaw's shoulder, causing his shot to miss, the bullet kicking up dirt. Jeremiah turned, returning fire. The outlaw collapsed, his pistol spinning away. Silence fell over the field. The remaining bandits fled, dragging their wounded. Dust hung in the air, tinted red by the setting sun. Evelyn gasped for breath, feeling as though she had just sprinted 100 miles. Jeremiah dropped to his knees, exhausted. They locked eyes, each reeling in the aftermath of mortal danger. In the hush, they heard the refugees, cheering, weeping, emerging from the safety of the trees. The mothers clutched their children. The old men lowered makeshift weapons. Hope flitted across their faces, fragile but real. Evelyn walked slowly to Jeremiah's side. He looked up at her with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice raw. "I didn't want you to throw your life away for my guilt." She knelt, trembling. "I'm not here because of your guilt. I'm here because somebody has to stand up for what's right. And I couldn't let you face it alone." He closed his eyes, relief streaming down his cheeks in silent tears. "Thank you." For a moment, the world seemed to catch its breath. In that fleeting space, they understood each other. Both carried wounds that ran deeper than bullets, but together, they had found a shred of redemption. Over the following days, the refugees rallied. With Jeremiah's leadership and Evelyn's resilience, they gathered enough supplies from the defeated bandits to survive. Word spread that the outlaws had been dealt a heavy blow. Some of them fled deeper into the wilds, unwilling to risk another confrontation. Evelyn wondered if she might stay with the group, form a small settlement. But restlessness stirred in her. She hadn't forgotten her father's homestead, nor her own dream. One cool morning, she packed her saddlebag. Jeremiah approached, looking more at peace than she'd ever seen him. "You headin' out?" She nodded, her eyes flickering with a hint of sadness and determination. "I need to see if I can rebuild my father's ranch. That place, it's home." He gently touched her arm. "I understand." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you coming?" He hesitated. In the distance, children were playing, their laughter a testament to the second chance he'd given them. "They still need me here, for a while at least. But maybe one day I'll come find you." Evelyn's throat felt tight. She managed a small, grateful smile. "Take care of them. And yourself, Jeremiah Finch." Their parting was simple. No grand promises, no tears, just a mutual understanding that in the lawless frontier, fate had bound them for a time. Now, their paths diverged so they could each follow the call of conscience. Evelyn rode off alone, the morning sun warming her back, the wide plains stretching before her. She carried only a few supplies, but her heart felt light. She had faced death and found the strength not just to survive, but to protect others. For the first time since her father's murder, she believed she could honor his final plea and stay strong, stronger than the guns, storms, and betrayals that threatened to crush her spirit. And in that she was free. In the face of cruelty, mercy can be our last defiance. The will to protect others, even when trust feels foolish, can turn strangers into allies. Strength is not in how many bullets you fire, but in the courage to do what's right when no one else will. Thank you for listening to Trapped in the Wild West: How She Survived When No One Else Could. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think about this tale of survival, trust, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories
Stories alive on the frontier.